What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Spot Podcast. It is a Tuesday morning. We're back. Sean and I are getting close back to school. I start this week. He starts next week. So getting back into a little routine here. Sean, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, man, 7 straight Sixers victories, so I can't complain at all. Joel Embiid looks like the most dominant player in basketball right now. It's awesome just seeing the growth this guy is going on, so I couldn't be happier watching the Sixers right now, even though they are kind of shitty teams that they're beating up on. Like, I love to see how they're playing, the way they're winning, and I've been thrilled.
Yeah, man. It's I was talking to my boss yesterday at work, and I'm like, this is a part of the schedule that you looked forward to as a
Yeah.
Sixers fan. I'm sure that they were looking forward to. But they went through hell at the beginning part of this year. They had a really tough schedule for the first 20, 25 games. And on top of that, they got kind of wiped through with COVID. And that was before the league implemented any of the rules that help. Yeah, the hardship contracts and everything. So, I don't feel bad about it being bad teams. They should beat these teams. And not only are they beating them now, they blew the doors off the Rockets last night. Like from the beginning, they were just in control of that game. It got down to 8 and 10 at times, but they really dominated last night. So what did you feel from that game?
Yeah, it's just not fair for Joel Embiid to be playing against Daniel Theis and Christian Wood. And I mean,
Yeah.
Daniel Theis has to have nightmares about Joel Embiid. Like, he has to see that guy in his sleep. And think about the last time the Sixers and Rockets played was the triple double out of Embiid. And then to follow that up to such a dominant performance that he doesn't even have to take the court in the fourth quarter is awesome. And I do think that's not something to brush over. It really is meaningful that them are putting games away and really just conclusive wins. Like, there's been so many games, not just this season, but in years past, where the Sixers have let worse teams linger and have played down to their level. To see them kind of stepping on teams' decks and be in full control is awesome. And I mean, that starts with Joel, and he sets the tone for everybody. I've totally loved seeing him calling out publicly for Matisse to shoot more threes. Matisse follows it up, shooting 2 for 5, the most 3-point attempts in any game all season. We saw the same thing with Maxey about a week or two ago when he said how he needs to shoot threes. Maxey followed it up by honestly playing a major role in winning that Sixers the next game. So the growth in leadership, the growth in performance, just the growth in IQ of him seeing the game, and you can see him pointing out where he wants guys to go or guys to stay, and plays just developing before it even happens. So it's been so cool to just watch this guy grow, and the team's following right along with him.
Yeah, he has been on a different level this year. Like you mentioned, the IQ and the passing, and there was one play that stuck out to me, just jumped off the screen to me last night. And it's been working a lot with Matisse in the dunker spot. And I think Doc finally found his guy to play there. He tried everyone else. So he found Matisse can be productive in that spot. But Embiid got doubled, and without even really looking, he threw this swing, this wraparound pass. And it was a zip pass. It was wicked. And it was really, really nice to see him just know. Like, that was a Jokic type. That's like a guy that understands the game. And I'm not going to compare their passing. Obviously, Jokic is, an all-timer in terms of big man and passing skills. But you see him develop that IQ, like you said, and just the ability to know where everyone is or where they're supposed to be. And I think last night he was having a little bit of fun with it. He tried to throw an over-the-head pass that ended up going out of bounds around Danny Green. But you got to love that. You got to love that he's trying to distribute. He's trying to have fun. He was just cooking. Everything he was doing last night was working, and he gets his 30-point mark for his 7th straight and his 9th straight on the road, which breaks the Sixers record. And then he gets to chill for the fourth quarter. You really can't ask for anything more from him last night.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, it's crazy. The ceiling for this guy keeps raising, and I mean, the growth in IQ, I think, has been my biggest takeaway this year. And for me, that does change the timeline of things. I for sure no longer content with if this drags into the off season and all the wavering Simmons rumors. And we're going to talk about in a second how Tobias is starting to get linked to some trades, and Daryl Morey just has to find a way to put some remnants of a complete team around Joel Embiid for this season, because he is so ready to compete. And even if it's just finding pieces that will catch and shoot and cut better, and just he is so ready to be the complete centerpiece and of a championship contender. And everything he talks about, everything he preaches is all coming true. And I mean, I just can't ask for the names that he's now lining up next to. He's tied with AI with a bunch of Sixers thing. First one in franchise record for the Sixers for 7 straight 30-point games. There's records that he's kind of in the same remnants of LeBron with. There's the one here was Joel Embiid finished with 31 points tonight. He joins AI 4 times, and Wilt as the only ones. The Sixers with 7 straight 30-point games. Iverson and Chamberlain share the record for 8 straight, so he gets one more. He ties that, and it's just like in with these such crazy names for both the Sixers and NBA history that it's like it's crazy just watching this guy.
Yeah, and like we've been talking about, he's just been getting better. And when you're looking at it and the way that he plays now, bringing the ball up, attacking in space, attacking bigs that can't guard him on the perimeter with his ball handle, which has gotten much better. But then just being able to pass out of the post and make the right reads and make live reads to see who's open and which defender is doubling and finding that guy. It's just been incredible. And like that, like you kind of what you referenced there is that's going to win games more than him dominating and scoring 45 points. Like him being able to get 5 assists in a night, or he's been like averaging close to 5, like that, it opens up everything for everyone. Yeah. And if you put better fitting pieces around him and you put guys around that knock down threes, because like it seems like they don't have a lot of guys that do that, especially at a night where they don't have Seth Curry. They really struggle from that area. So if you have guys that knock down threes consistently or can create off those skip passes, and Matisse and guys like that who can, produce out of the dunker spot, or when they're basically gifted a basket, just capitalize on it. It's hard not to be excited about what you see from him. And to go through the rest of the guys, they had 6 players in double figures last night. They had 30-point Joel, but then they didn't have anyone else that scored more than 13. It was Tobias, Andre Drummond, Furkan, Matisse, and Isaiah Joe all scored in double figures last night. So out of those guys, who are you most encouraged by last night?
Probably Furkan, to be honest. It's been awesome to see kind of the recovery in him and him snapping out of the cold spell. And I mean, when he's hitting threes at a high rate, he's a great fit on this team. Just with all the reasons that we've been talking about, with the doubles that Joel demands, the free shots that open up. I'm continuing to be more and more frustrated with Tobias. I mean, 13 points, but he had 13 points on 17 shots, 6 of 17 from the field, 1 for 5 from 3, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Like, it's the lack of touch is really kind of blowing my mind, especially the around the basket ones. And I hope it like evens out and he gets hot and it settles out. But the amount of just bunnies and easy lay-ins that just find their way rolling off the rim or clanking off is so incredibly frustrating for me. And I mean, he just doesn't seem to have found a rhythm in like almost over a month now, which is it's getting scary.
Yeah, there was one last night to your point. There was one last night that he hit like a fake spin to the right and then hop step to his left and was like this far away, like literally just that little floater away, and it came up short. And I'm like, how did that come up short? You're a foot and a half away. And like those are just what became like the thing I think is frustrating about a game like that is we got so used to seeing him confidently make those all the time last year. He was really good last year, and like I think that's still in him. I don't think we'd be as frustrated if he was just the Tobias Harris of last year. It's just there's games and there's times where that happens, and there's stretches of times like he misses a lot of those. And 1 of 5 from deep, man, he just doesn't have it from there. Last night, he can't lead a fast break. I've never seen a player like be going full steam down the middle of the lane and then just like hop step and just like jump stop in the mid, like at the free throw line. Yeah. He had like a 3-on-2 fast break, and the only decision you can make is to jump stop at the free throw line and then pump fake and pass the ball out. Like it's just not modern basketball. He struggled with their athleticism. Like the Houston's bigs aren't very like skilled or like dominant. Like Christian Wood is an athlete and he's really good offensively, but defensively he's not there. He's just athletic defensively. And Daniel Tice is athletic enough, and like Kenyon Martin Jr. Like those guys should not be able to hold Tobias, but he just doesn't compete with them physically. So I don't know, man. It's been like a really disappointing stretch of games for Tobias again.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to one extent. Like I'm encouraged by the shot selection and by like I have seen progress with like he is getting decent shots and decent looks, but to be missing things that are good looks and like stuff around the basket and open threes and stuff that like are shots that I should feel good about him taking are still not finding their way through the basket, which is I don't really know what to make of that. And I like I hope he snaps out of it, that he becomes the Tobias Harris of last year. And I don't know. It's getting more and more frustrating. To your athlete point, I do want to give a shout out to Charlie Brown Jr. too, because
Yeah.
I absolutely love what he's bringing to the Sixers team. And it's really hard because there's not really like a spot for him to grab. Like, I think the most realistic shot of him clinging to this roster would be to get rid of Miles Powell and give him that second two-way deal, which I also like having Miles Powell around, so that would also disappoint me. But there is just like the athleticism that he has just shows how lacking it is on the Sixers roster. Like, he immediately makes an impact just being active, being long, being quick, being an athlete. Like, the Sixers just don't have enough of that. And I mean, a guy who's a super nice guy, super funny guy, and a guy I really like, and I would love for him to find a way to stick on the Sixers team. He's doing everything in his power to find a way to. So I hope the Sixers figure something out there.
Yeah, he was definitely a joy to watch. And like you said, he brings a little bit of an aspect that they don't have. And just having an athlete, it's really, when you go down this roster, it's not there very often. But I do want to go back quickly. Like, I wanted to talk about Furkan because you mentioned him. Just like really quick, man. Think about last night and the fact that he started at point guard. Like, he was the point guard going into the game. Like, even 2 years ago. Even last year, but like specifically 2 years ago, if you're like, Furkan's going to be the point guard for like 30 minutes tonight, we'd all be losing our minds. Crazy. So just a shout out to him for being able to evolve and develop. And he gets like, I don't want to say it in a weird way, he gets freaky in the lane sometimes. Like, he's so like crafty. There's like those long, slow steps that he takes, and then his 7-foot wingspan and long ass arms, and he gets to the rim. And there was one he came across like right to left, slowed it down. It looked like he was going to pass, and then he kind of just like looked off a defender and like finger rolled it. And it was like, man, that was kind of, I don't know, that got me like going a little bit. I can't believe Furkan has that in the bag, but he does. And Isaiah Joe had a great game. Matisse, I think, had a great game again. Seeing him score in double figures again, and taking smart shots and good shots. And like you said, 5 3-point attempts, and he made 2. So encouraging signs from there. But let's talk about the pressing issues a little bit here. There was another report that came out today, Brian Windhorst, and you said Mark Stein as well, also reported that the Sixers are looking into packaging Tobias Harris in any Simmons deal that they make. It's not, it's hard to tell which teams would be involved in that. And then also, there has been some rumors about John Collins and the Sixers. So to start with the Tobias thing, how would you feel about that? And just what was your overall takeaways from that report?
Yeah, so I'm absolutely interested in moving on from Tobias Harris at this point. I think the number one goal of this entire roster should be bringing out the best in Joel Embiid, and neither Ben Simmons or Tobias Harris do that. So finding a way to move on now, even if it is ditching the contract and open things up potentially for an offseason move, I'm more okay with that, with like the Harris type move. And I mean, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, the packaging together, I think, is what kind of stunts me. And I guess to one aspect, it's like the Simmons still has like appeal as a trade aspect, and Tobias is for the most part a major negative with that. Like, to really trade him, you're going to have to package him with something. So I guess that's kind of the thought process. But I really would kind of like if we're talking about potential deals, and we're going to talk way more in depth about this later in the week, but something along the framework of like a Simmons to Atlanta for John Collins and Cam Reddish, and then flipping Toby for like Buddy Hield and something like that. Like, that's building a complete team, and that's something I'm super interested in. Getting it all done in one shot seems like a little ambitious to me, but I mean, I like that Morey shopping. I'm confident things are heating up, so I am excited overall by kind of the rumors.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. John Collins, when talking about John Collins, I'm like, if you swap John Collins and Tobias Harris, sign me up like so quick. Obviously not in a trade. I just mean, like, if you take out Tobias Harris from this roster, you're not going to get there with Tobias, obviously. But to take out Tobias and you replace him with John Collins, absolutely, man. John Collins spaces the floor better, much better athlete, more versatile defender. And obviously, we're going to get some poster dunks as well, which he does.
He would immediately be the best athlete on the Sixers roster, which to me is super appealing. I don't think he's like perfect. Like, I don't look at him and he's be like, that's what we're missing, that's the trade. But from a talent perspective, I mean, I have a hard time because I used to be a big John Collins guy, dating back to draft time. I was a huge fan. Then there was that
Yeah.
Embiid dunk where he hang on him, and then he went to continue to talk shit on a podcast, saying how it was the most meaningful game dunk he's ever had. So John Collins really has been on my hate list for since that time.
Yeah.
But I would forgive him if he became a Sixer. I mean, the spacing issue, he's been a 40% three-point shooter for pretty much most of his career. He doesn't shoot at a crazy high rate, which somewhat concerns me. I do really like the idea of him being the 5 in the backup lineup, like running him alongside Maxey. I think would be awesome with like a second unit. So there is a lot to like there. I don't think he's perfect, but I definitely think it's something like I would do and worth considering.
Yeah, I don't think he's perfect, but I think he's better than Tobias. I think he
Yeah, for
demands
sure.
less of the offense to be effective. Like just defensively, you think about a smaller rim protector, a guy that can help as a help side defender, just a freak athlete and a guy that like I think I would love him here, and I think a lot of guys would love him here. Um, and then talking about the Harris and Simmons, I think it seems more like it would be a 3-team or 4-team deal. That it means not just like, oh, they're gonna package Ben and Tobias and move on from there. They're gonna like it's gonna be 4 teams. Ben goes somewhere, Tobias goes elsewhere, but you have to have both of them to make the money work and all that kind of good stuff. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it continues to progress. And like you said, we're going to get into that. We're going to go more in depth on Thursday and try to break down what could potentially be happening because it seems like things. I mean, we're less than a month away, man. We're right there. We're
Yeah.
like literally just like exactly a month as of yesterday. So this is it's starting to heat up. It's starting to the clock's ticking. I think we're all getting antsy, and the Sixers are winning. So I don't know. It's gonna be a fun stretch. But for now, we're gonna move into your interview. So if you want to kind of preview that, and then we'll head into that.
Yeah, super cool interview with Roger Galo, who created the Galo Shooting Method. A very analytical talk about kind of basketball, especially with 3-point shooting in today's day and age. So, a slight apology for the video with it. I did my best chopping up the audio to make sure it sounded all right. I did as best as I could. It sounds decent. The audio is fine, but it's a little rough watching his picture a little bit. But either way, enjoy the interview and super interesting stuff overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So enjoy, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Swap Podcast. I'm here with a special guest today, Roger Galo, who is an NBA offensive efficiency specialist and the founder of the Galo Shot Making Method. So, Roger, how are you today?
Very well. Thank you, Sean.
Awesome. And I just want to start out and get a little bit into your background and tell everybody a little bit about you. So, to start off with, you were a 4-year starter at Juniata College, set a ton of records there, 3rd leading scorer in the country, leading scorer each season you were there, most points in Juniata College history, and you were identified as an NBA prospect. So is this just kind of your love for basketball back then? And obviously you were quite good at it. So is this kind of how you got into the field you're in? And is that how you started out?
Yeah, that is pretty much how I started out. The journey that began about 14 years ago, delving into shot making, and even it was inconceivable that I would consider changing my shot. Obviously, I was height challenged as a basketball player, 6 feet tall, short, however way you want to view that, right? But being genetically challenged height-wise, I knew early that I needed to develop a pretty good shot in order to continue to play ball that I fell in love with back when I grew up in Indiana, of all places. How apropos, right? That's where I first fell in love with the game. That first boom,
That's awesome. And so kind of that love has kept with you and you transitioned into kind of the training aspect of things. So how did that happen?
You know, there was a gap. There was a large gap that occurred maybe 10 years where I don't like saying this, but this is the honest truth. I was watching ball on television, and I'm watching how inefficient or ineffective a lot of modern day players were at putting the ball into the hoop, whether it was from the foul line or the 3-ball area or just field goal shooting. I thought, I'm one of these older former ball players who's bitter, angry, right? Blah, blah, blah. No, I'm really not that way. But it appears to be happening before my eyes as I'm witnessing it, whether it's in college or if it was in the NBA. So I started looking at statistical information, and lo and behold, it turned out to be a fact. It was supported by a lot of documentation. The New York Times article that came in front of me accidentally spoke about 50 years of practice, Sean, for the foul line. And the headline was just that, 50 years of practice, comma, no results. They're talking about foul shooting. So little things like that really intrigued me even more and began motivating me about why was I such a great shooter? What went into what I did? And was it the right stuff to do? I assumed it would be because I was so good at it. But that opened up, that started the journey. And so there was a big gap there. And when I returned to it, I started asking those kinds of questions about the gooseneck, the elbow under, the stance, the routine at the foul line. And I couldn't get very good answers from the people in basketball. And I got the ears of some very, what would be considered basketball pundits. And they, even with all due respect, gave me some almost flippant answers. And so I sought answers outside. I went to the kinesiology departments of universities, the physics departments, and asked them the same questions. And they gave me some very scientifically supported answers. And within those answers, I made quite a few pretty remarkable discoveries about how we probably should have shot that traditional style that I had so-called mastered. And that began the journey. And wow. So 14 years later, I'm still excited about it.
Wow. Yeah, that is fascinating.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't think the journey's over yet.
Yeah, I love to hear that. But yeah, that's fascinating stuff. And I guess like at the core, so what makes it different about kind of the Galo method, and what makes it different from like a traditional kind of shooting, not shooting coach, but just kind of a theoretical approach?
It's the biggest difference is it's all rooted or based or supported with scientific principles, whether they're from physics. How do we release the ball? Well, that's been arguable for decades. One shooting coach, I won't mention names, but plenty of them, they want you to release the ball off of these two fingers, your index and your middle finger. Another shooting coach will want you to release it off of a different part of the hand. Another shooting coach will have a third. There's universally two most accepted ways to release the ball, of which I used one, and apparently pretty effectively. So I thought, and most people scouting me thought, only to find out accidentally that neither of those are good release points. So how am I going to find out what the most ideal release point is if all basketball minds are of the same thought process? And that's why I was pretty much forced, or at least tempted, to go outside of the basketball community to try to find out those kinds of answers. Now I know exactly where the ball should be released. Not because it's comfortable to me, not because I think you should do it, it worked for me, but because science dictates, and it makes a great deal of sense. Why did we accept something else? And what I've come to learn is pretty much because it became accepted, it became copied. We always talk about sports in general, maybe as a copycat kind of entity. Well, I copycatted a great shooter. That's how I developed my original jump shot. And he was a traditionalist. So that became fascinating to me. Wait a second, all these years doing it that way, I could have averted. I could have been even better, been more consistent. I could have been a faster shooter with some of the other discoveries that I came across. Where do you release within the shot from start to finish? It wasn't where I originally, the optimal system that one ought to be using based on science wasn't the one I used.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. I mean, that's why it was so intriguing to suddenly turn into 14 years of effort.
Yeah. Definitely. And in recent years, especially, we've seen such like a change in just kind of the analytical approach in all of sports and especially basketball. And I mean, I think one of the things the clearest evidence has become in just like the increase in 3-pointers and how often that's thrown up. And like, I mean, just logistically, when you think about it, just 3 points is obviously more than two, and putting a priority on this. And it sounds like you're very tied into kind of the analytical approach. And do you kind of agree with that sentiment that like 3-pointers are obviously the direction the NBA is going, but do you think that's a sustainable path?
Absolutely, unequivocally, it is. Yes, and if you think it's being done voluminously now, watch what happens in the next 5 years. It's going to continue to increase. It's a funny aside story here. When I do a demonstration in the past, I don't always do this, but when I've done a demonstration in the past in a clinic of mine, I'll challenge somebody very tall, very basketball looking, and basketball capable. And we'll do a quick maybe 5 to 5 points, something like that. Everything's a 1-pointer. Boom, 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 boom. I get ball first. I can reel off 5 quick points uncontestedly from the 3-point area. 25 feet, 27 feet, 28 feet. So that game is over very quickly. It can take it. Now, the next part of the demonstration is me playing traditional style ball. In my day, the mantra was take it to the rim. Take it to the rim. A high percentage shot. I'm laughing because think about that. As I have recently in the last, as a result of this journey, I was considered, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I was very good at taking it to the rim. And if I couldn't finish, I usually got fouled. So I scored by virtue of doing one or the other. And that obviously helped my scoring ability and value to the team. With that being said, when I do that demonstration, I'm huffing, I'm puffing, I'm exerting a great deal of energy. I'm getting blocked, taking a 6'7" guy down into the paint and trying to go into the rim as close as I can and put up a 2-pointer. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Did I mention the risk of injury? Because I've gotten injured doing that over that span of time by some big, strong players who didn't like that. Obviously, we all have egos, right? You don't get that. You're not subjected to that 25 feet out. You got one guy. So it's the second, and I'm actually writing a book. In the book, I'll be talking about the second easiest yet most important shot in the game of basketball is the 3-pointer. The second easiest, most or least contested shot in the game of basketball is the 3-pointer. The only one simpler and not contested at all is when you get fouled and you go to the foul line. So one of my hypotheses is, should the gap between a 3-point shooter's percentage and a foul shooter percentage, a good foul shooter's percentage, be as broad as we've come to accept it being? And I honestly and very firmly believe it should not be. It should be the 2 highest shooting percentages on the stat sheet. It should not be the field goal shot for reasons I just alluded to. That's a chat. There's a help guy 4 feet this way, 3 feet that, sneaking up on me when I'm doing a spin move. There's not one out there.
That's very interesting and it makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting when you put it like that and think about it like that. And I mean, we've seen throughout the NBA this year, it feels like there's way more 40%, above 40% 3-point shooters, and there is like a growing rate and an increase in that. And I do agree. I think it's going to continue to build that way. It's just become a point of emphasis. And even just thinking like mathematically, like a way I always kind of put it is, if you have a 40% 3-point shooter who shoots 50% from the field, you shoot 10 shots at each and they hit for their average. Going 50% from the field, that's 10 points. 40% from me, that's 12 points. And just like mathematically, there is something there that it makes sense why so many teams are building towards this. And I mean, we've seen the way teams like Golden State have changed the way the game's played with kind of the emphasis on it. And like, it is just fascinating that there is like a revolution kind of going on in the NBA and all of basketball. And I don't really see it stopping either. But do you think there's kind of a devaluation for players who maybe 3-pointers aren't their specialty, like guys that don't flourish for perimeter when I think about like big men and post scorers and that kind of thing? Do you think they're kind of going out of style, or will there always be a place for them?
I think they're going to be. I don't know if I think I could say this. I think that eventually the pay scale may reflect that kind of value. It may reflect that the kind of value that one player brings versus another player. And I'll tell you why I say that, or how it was actually, the thought was actually buttressed in Vegas this past summer when I was out there, when an executive said to me that they now have with the analytics, they now have a number, a dollar figure that they can attach to the annual earnings increase in annual earnings if a player moves from, let's say, 30% from the 3 to 35. Now that seems like a big jump, 30 to 30. It's only 5%, but that's a pretty bad shooting percentage to begin with. So if that player can come into the NBA and improve from either from college to the time they set foot on a court in the NBA, they're expected to be paid more money. So I think there's going to be a de-emphasis for the math. The mere fact that you alluded to or gave a great example of is the math. Like we can't trade baskets. Not when there's a 3-ball worth 50% more in production. You can't. Mathematically, you can't win that. What I find really fascinating is one of the discoveries. A combination of a lot of the discoveries I made and changes within my own shooting system, my own traditional shooting style, has been that the peaks and valleys, the cold nights, somebody going cold or their shots off, that doesn't seem that's proven to be something that is, if it can't be eliminated, it can be mitigated by virtue of the mechanics, the biomechanics, the simplification that the Galo method has within it. They're simpler, they're more streamlined, they're more repeatable, they're more ergonomically or kinesiologic. There's a real fancy word. I didn't even know what it meant when I first started the journey. They're more kinesiologically correct. They're simpler to replicate. Well, that's where we get into the reps. Well, that can be damaging if the mechanics aren't good. And that's something that's become quite a revelation throughout this entire process and journey.
Yeah, that is, again, this is all very interesting stuff. To kind of a change of pace, but not fully. Like, I do think analytically, the one, I guess, kind of issue I have is it does take away like kind of the human element of things. And I guess like my full question is just, how much do you think like confidence in mindset plays a role in shooting, or do you think it all is kind of purely mechanical?
It's not all purely mechanical, but what I have again discovered through the process is because I deal with players who come to me and either their parents or they themselves or both admit they think it's a mental thing. They think it's just a headset. It's whatever it's mentally connected, and I don't ignore that, because that confidence is pretty. You don't want to take a shot thinking, well, I'm not sure it's going to go in, but I'm going to shoot it anyway. That's not a good frame of reference to begin with. You want to take a shot that you feel confident that if you get it off, it'll go in more than it won't. That's the mentality you'd like to have somebody have taking a shot. Unless they're taking ill-advised bad shots, of course. With that being said, again, the simplicity, the streamlining of movements, it seems to have the effect on players that I've trained, male or female, to exude confidence in the execution of those movements. Does that make sense? The movements are so repeatable, and because they're repeatable, there's no doubt entering. Can I make this very important game-winning foul shot? at this critical point in time within the game with 2 seconds left. That doesn't, I deal with that by virtue of having them understand that if they do A, B, C, and D, logically E will follow. And E in this example would be the ball going through that basket. And it's not, well, will it? No, it will. If you skip A or you skip B or you deviate from either of those on the way, it won't. And that's interesting because we watched a game last night, and whatever player is going off for 40 points or 30 points because they're having a remarkably good shooting night, 2 nights later, that same player is suddenly missing a lot of shots that they made 2 nights ago. What really happens? And the flippant kind of response in basketball circles is, well, everybody's off a night or two. But no, what really happens? And nobody wants to answer that question. Now, the scientists I spoke with, they shed a lot of light on it for me. They've made me understand what really happens. And that's why my own system shooting style technique changed, because it doesn't have to happen based on some scientific principles that prevent the unreliability or that introduce more repeatable, scientifically supported movements versus the ones I used to have.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I mean, I do think there is like something to, like, you can tell when there's a guy that just like has it that night and is like red hot. Everything he throws up feels like it going in. But like you said, that is kind of bred from the repeating and practice and doing the same motion. And that is all built with like practice in the gym. And the same with somebody that's cold, when you can tell when a guy just doesn't feel confident and doesn't have it and like that kind of thing. So there is, I do think, like still a human element. And also when we talk about like shooting splits, and I think like a 3-and-D player is so key in the NBA, and it's become such a significant rotational piece. Every team kind of has to have guys that just come in, the wing type, shooting guard type, that play defense and shoot 3-pointers. And something I think gets so like brushed over is shooting splits are so tough. When we think about like a guy coming in playing limited minutes in that role, which is honestly become one of the most important roles in the NBA, like they're probably getting 3 to 4 3-point shots per game. For a guy that's like, say, a 40% 3-point shooter, which is a very good percentage, he's going to make 4 out of every 10. Like you could get the split where he hits 3 and then the next he's going to be 1 for 6 on the rest. You could get a 0 for 3, and being like so judged off like those limited attempts, I think is really tough for guys. But like you,
I agree. Yeah.
So, but like you kind of said, like it is a like mechanical, like in the end, when we go through hot and cold spells with these guys who get these limited attempts, like it all does balance out in the end. But I do think guys are put in like a tough position being judged off purely that. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with the vast part of that. Where I would differ would be the way that guy should be training. And that's
gotcha.
That I don't see that. I see almost everybody who's in that classification of player training the same way that they all are training. And if that player is being utilized, then I would submit that there could be more effective training that would benefit that player coming in under those conditions, being asked to perform a game, 15 attempts a game, blah, 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 blah. Does that make some sense to you, Sean, coming over the airwaves? That, you know, if a player's sitting on the first 8 minutes of the first quarter, how are they training? Are they just putting up reps? Or are they going over there, wherever there is at that gym, sitting for a couple of minutes, for example, coming in and taking 2 shots?
Gotcha.
And
doing
that's really
some
other basketball motion, going sit again for 3 minutes, rechecks back in and then takes 2 or 3 shots from those locations within their offensive scheme that they should be taking them. And how do they perform in that training regimen versus the one that's become traditional, the most accepted way we all train as shooters? And I would submit that the way we train can affect that player's efficiency and effectiveness, regardless of how many, in some cases, regardless of how many attempts. I think the training can have a big impact on how they ultimately perform.
Yeah, that's something I never really thought about like that with guys kind of training. And there definitely should be kind of an individualized approach to each of these guys, because like you've pointed out, like for more like specialist roles should be treated as specialists and kind of growing in that, and that you're not going to get better practicing something that you're not going to use. So I think that's an excellent point. A little bit more of like a general question. Well, not really. It's more kind of Sixers specific. Is Tobias Harris is a guy who I know we can nitpick on all forms, but he's a guy who I feel like every shot that he kind of misses tends to be short and off the front rim. Do you think that's more of like a mechanical issue, and what kind of would be like a typical issue for somebody missing short?
That is. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, cutting out a little bit, but okay. You're good.
The screen went blank, but that is most likely, and I mean the probability of that being a mechanically related issue is inordinately high, and there are 2 halves to a shooter's, without getting too sophisticated and technical. I would venture to say, because why is he so reliable from the foul line, and he's kind of, and I'm being harsh here, but for purposes of comparison, why is he so unreliable from the 3? Now, in my earlier comments, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't comment about this. Well, I did about the gap. Okay, his gap is huge between those 2 areas of scoring. Well, mechanically, he's performing more optimally there, but mechanically he's performing a lot less optimally over here. Well, what's going on mechanically? That begs a very important question, doesn't it? What's really going on? Did he forget what movements to make after all these years, after all this practice? So there, again, some of I alluded to this. The mechanics he's using are more similar to the traditional mechanics I used to use. They are difficult to control. They're excessive in numbers. They all have to work in unison, and when you have more movable parts trying to work in unison, it's easier to become out of unison than if they were simpler or reduced in the number of components. And that's what he's got going on. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, with that being said, as I was about to mention earlier, I would look at the bottom half. I would say that the bottom half of his shooting body is being not paid enough attention to in his training, in his development as a shooter. And that's something that needs to be addressed, if you will, if he wants to get beyond that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's very interesting. All this stuff is very fascinating to me. And one last question for you here: where do you think most players fall short on areas that they improve when talking about their shooting? Is it like mechanical, like we've talked about the most part? Do you think it's specifically kind of a release point, leg motion, all the above, or what do you think?
Boy, that is, because so many of them have so many different issues. That's one of the hardest questions for me to answer, because it really does vary from player to player. Let's use a specific player. Somebody brought this up to me about a week ago, I think it was. Shake Milton, right? And that I found really interesting. They are working on his, or he is, or a combination of that, are working on his release, his quickness of shot. And the focus seemed to be on his wrist action. Well, that's a very small part, contrary to popular belief. That's a very small part of the entire shooting system that happens to be a very finicky part of the shooting system. Now, if what I've just said is really factual, then that probably isn't going to yield the results that shooter would like to gain from the development, from that work, from that effort he's putting into that. And that, so for him, that's that release part is his biggest issue right now. The interesting thing is, usually there are triggers that are happening between movements. So there may be another component to his challenges in that regard that I obviously wouldn't or couldn't go into here without more information. But for him, that seems to be one of the most important things right now at this point in his playing career. Season. For another player, Furkan, somebody that came into my gym who's no longer with the staff, asked me about Furkan, and he had a what I call a hot stove kind of shooting style. He would shoot his arms back real quickly on even a 3-point attempt. Not conducive to consistency. Now, doesn't have anything to do with his release action, unless you go beyond just the release and go all the way back to the shoulder joint. Now we got some excessive movement that he's probably not even aware of. That is more detrimental than helpful. So that's why that's such a hard question to answer. And those are the only 2 examples I'll give you, but they're almost endless.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes sense. And for Shake specifically, I totally agree with all that. At times I've said it kind of looks like he's shooting like a medicine ball over a basketball. Like he kind of throws like a heave into his shot. So I do agree that kind of that the wrist is like a point of emphasis for him. But like you said, there's a lot more going on there. And then outside of that, that's pretty much all I got for you. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff, where they can follow along and get to know more about the Galo method.
They can go to my website. It's rogergalo.com. They can follow me at Galo Method. And there's a lot of information on there. I've been featured, fortunately, like I am here with you, throughout the country on some different podcasts. And it's always fun and exciting for me to participate in these, because I'm trying to get it out there that there might be an alternative way, based almost entirely in science, to shoot that ball and make it go into the hoop from every scoring area of basketball. And that's pretty exciting. It was an unintended journey, but I'm enjoying every minute of it. And I think it might become the next great way to shoot. So I'm grateful to you for having me on. Keep up the good work that you're doing. I hope your audience found it a little interesting, if not, at least thought provocative, and understand fully after all this time that it's hard to change. Change is not easy, and to have a player change his movements it can sometimes be very easy, depending on what it is and what their mindset is, but sometimes it can be a little more labor intensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And great stuff. Appreciate you coming on again. And everybody make sure you go check him out. I will tag him and everything. So thank you for joining, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you much, Sean. Stay healthy.